episode of my podcast, Beginner's Mind. My name is Chris. This week, I had the honor to moderate a panel discussion at the Resi conference. It is one of the most important meetings for early stage investments in the United States. Life Science Nation is the organizer of the event series. Last year in March, the Resi conference visited Europe for the first time. The city of choice was beautiful Vienna. I invited Dennis Ford and Greg Mannix to join my Life Science get-together number 8. At the Resi conference in Vienna, I had the unique opportunity to speak at the panel How Business Angels and Family Offices View Seed Rounds and Series A Financing. At the Bio US, I again supported the Resi conference as a speaker. This time, we were talking about European tech hubs. This year, the conference is back in Europe. This time, it should be Paris, but due to the actual situation with the coronavirus, the conference turned digital. Last Monday, we recorded the European Tech Hub panel. At the panel, I had the opportunity to speak with 3 wonderful speakers about their unique models in Europe. The introduction to the panel is given by Greg Mannix. Without any further ado, let's jump right into the introduction and into the panel discussion. Enjoy.
Hello, this is Greg Mannix. I'm Chief Conference Officer at Life Science Nation. We're the hosts of the Resi Conference Series. About a year ago, the first Resi Europe conference was held in Vienna. It was in March 2019. And that was the first time we had a focus program on the tech hubs from Europe. It's important because we think that tech hubs in all their diversity, and there is a lot of diversity, are playing a key role in moving the needle in Europe to help bring new drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital health platforms to the market. Over the past 18 months, our CEO at LSN, Dennis Ford, and myself have been traveling in Europe and meeting a lot of these tech hubs. In fact, we've had fundraising boot camps at 17 tech hubs, and we've met about 600 European entrepreneurs in doing so. On today's panel, 4 experts will be speaking about the early stage life science ecosystems in their own neck of the woods. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the new Digital Resi conference. My name is Christian Soschner. I have the honor to present the Tech Hub panel to you. Many thanks to Life Science Nation for the invite. I'm here with 3 wonderful speakers from Europe. Sharon Blokhuis, he is the Chief Business Officer at Pivot Park in the Netherlands. Olivier, Research Director at Servier in France, and Irene Vierker, who is the CEO at Init's Gründerservice in Vienna, Austria. Myself, I'm in the life science industry since 2006 and work with European startups since 2008. At the beginning in 2008, I was extremely frustrated because we almost had no support for life science startup companies in Europe. Since then, a lot has changed to the better. And when I look at the situation right now in Europe, basically what investors usually want to see are developed companies with some clinical data points, and life science companies need a lot of money to achieve that. So let's jump right into the discussion with our 3 wonderful speakers and find out how the situation is in Europe. Sharon, you are working in the Netherlands. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and your initiative?
Yeah, and also thanks to Life Science Nation for the invite. And So I'm Jerome Blockhouse. I'm the current CBO of the Pivot Park. Pivot Park is a young science park. It's 8 years old, but it has a rich history. Almost 100 years ago, one of the first pharma companies of the Netherlands was based there. It was called Organon. That later got acquired by Schering-Plough, which later got acquired by MSD. And then in 2011, MSD decided to separate part of the park. It was given back to the local municipality, and they decided to make this a hub for former employees of MSD that were part of their R&D that wanted to form startups. And so initially, we started with 22 startups. Now the park has over 60 companies there, and we're growing. A little bit about my background. I'm a scientist by training. Initially, I studied molecular virology, which could be topical and timely in this time. But then I switched. I did my PhD in immunology and genetics. I moved to the United States, to California, to do a postdoc at Stanford University. And then I, again, did a switch to focus on business development and investing. I worked with a group called Life Science Angels in the San Francisco Bay Area. From 2016 to 2019, I was the head of business development for the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy. But then I decided I missed Europe and I missed the Netherlands, and we came back, and I joined the Pivot Park. My main function there is to coordinate investment opportunities for the companies, to coordinate new opportunities, and I'm currently in the process of developing an incubator program focused on the things that we do well in Oz, which is drug discovery, drug development, and drug manufacturing. We have several companies already there that are doing all of those, and we think that having an incubator would just add value to the community. That's it.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Olivier, what about you? How is the situation at Servier in France?
Yeah, hello, Christian, and hello, everybody. Very happy again that Life Science Nation organized this meeting. I'm currently Scientific Director of Research at Servier, which is a global pharma company headquartered in France. We are actually a mid-sized company, so not the whole world knows about Servier, but we have a strong network of partners in the health sciences, and we do have a strong medical scientific culture, and that dates back to the founding of the company by Dr. Servier in the 1950s. So this is a great place to run drug discovery programs, to bring new solutions to patients, and we all know that this is extremely important. I'll say a few words about my background. I'm a scientist. I'm a biochemist by training. And actually, I'm very much of a Servier and a drug discovery guy, because I joined Servier right after my PhD as a postdoc, and I stayed there until from this time. I've been involved in drug discovery for 20 years now, and I'm passionate about technology and drug discovery. This is what I've been doing, at least for the most part of my career now. Establishing partnerships, and this is absolutely key in what I grew up with in the drug discovery area. We all know that there's no such thing as someone having a great idea and developing that into a medicine on his or her own. So drug discovery is mostly a question of finding the appropriate partners, and this is what I've been doing for years now. As a contributor or as a leader with various partners. It can be academic or private partners, small or large companies. In all cases, there's a lot of important in how we craft the partnership, and I think we'll have the opportunity to get back to this point later in the discussion. I've also been involved in quite a few initiatives that Servier went through in terms of company transformation. All companies go through transformations, especially when there's a change in the scope or in the remit of the company. And Servier went through these steps, and this has been a very important journey for the company and for myself. And this is where we are now, with a very strong focus on transforming our research activities, making what we are doing much more agile, flexible, matrix-based, partnership-based, everything that plenty of companies are trying to do. It's always easy to say, it's very often much more of a challenge to implement. And part of that is our project of having a brand new research center south of Paris on the Paris-Saclay cluster. And this is a fantastic project that will see 800 of our colleagues gathering into one single research site. We're all very excited by this, because obviously it's not only about having a brand new building, but also rethinking, as I was alluding to, our ways of working for drug discovery. And along all this, I mean, working in technology, partnerships for these years, we came up to the conclusion that reaching out to small companies is not always easy, and not always something that we think is the most appropriate to come as a customer, let's say, of these companies. So we are thinking of moving one step further and building a co-creation lab. Can be called an incubator, we will see. But alongside our new research center, having a very specific place to foster drug discovery innovation. And I'm very happy to be able to talk with our panelists on this project and get their insight and build together an overall view of what is going on in Europe in this respect.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Really impressive what you have achieved with your organization so far. Irene, you are CEO of one of the, I would say, most successful deep tech early stage incubation programs in Europe. Tell us a little bit more about you and your organization.
Yes, thank you very much for being invited in this high-class panel. Thank you for the organization in these critical times. My background is genetics, molecular biology, and I've worked with high-tech startups, in particular, of course, life sciences startups, since 2004. In that long period of time, there has been a lot of development and a lot of dynamics that in the past really has increased and getting faster and faster. So in its focuses on early stage healthcare startups, life sciences startups, but also others. We are an interdisciplinary university business incubator, and as such, we have been ranked amongst the top 20 university business incubators in the world since 2013, in fact. 2 years ago, we launched another acceleration program focusing on health startups at a little bit later stage. So startups that have some funding, have a certain team size, have some products on the market already. We call them corporate ready. Because what the other panelists have said before, that it's all about collaboration between startups and established players. And with the acceleration program Health at Vienna, we focus on that. We launched it together with Unica, which is one of the biggest private insurance companies here in Austria, but also with pharmaceutical partners like AstraZeneca, Novartis, Boehringer Ingelheim, Aegis, Sanofi. Of course, as we have had partnerships with the universities here in Vienna, including the medical university, we have a broad spectrum of academic partners also on board. and the partnership really grows over time. What we do there is really help health startups, digital health startups, to get access to the healthcare system, not only in Austria, and maybe Christian, you talk about some other aspects of, really linking those startups further to international players. And by that, helping the healthcare system to transform in a way that it really needs to transform. And now just, reflecting on the current crisis situation, what could have happened if we all had in place telemedical solutions already, which is little in Europe still. Asia is much further advanced in telemedical solutions. The United States is much further advanced, but here in Europe, it's really some thing that we are lagging behind. So this is what we do. Plus, we help the universities to really perform their tech transfer into startups. This is our main focus.
Irene, and I do agree with all panelists. I think these days to develop deep tech life science projects has a lot to do with collaboration cross borders. And I'm really impressed that in 2020 we already have working and functioning ecosystems. There is always, of course, some room for improvement. Irene, for example, mentioned telemedicine, where we lag a little bit behind in Europe, but we have promising companies already in the pipeline. The question I have at this point is, what does it take to attract startups and early stage companies to these ecosystems so that they get the right support? What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you, Christian. It's interesting because the Pivot Park is not associated with any Dutch university, and so the traditional model of startups coming from the nearest by university and finding a place at the hub of the university doesn't work for us. The way that we are formed and are differentiating ourselves from the other Dutch players in this field is that we historically have a very strong background in again drug development, small molecules, and chemistry. And so the labs that we offer startups are custom. They are focused typically on biochemistry, and then we emphasize our community so that we have already companies on our park that have done it before, that have taken an idea from the drawing board all the way to clinical trials and even market. And I think this is really key, to have an ecosystem in which everyone can learn from each other, where there are also the companies that can help, so that can help in clinical registration consulting, that can help in manufacturing solutions, and that can be attractive for a startup that just is coming from either a university somewhere in the Netherlands or a founder from a larger company. It's attractive because they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can really tap into that ecosystem at Pivot Park.
Thank you very much, Sharon. You mentioned lab space, and I can tell from my own experience in the last couple of months, this is really one of the key points that's most needed in Europe, to have sufficient lab space, especially for drug development companies. I was searching for an early stage company about half a year to find something here in Vienna. So there is a little bit to improve on that side. Thanks for pointing that out, that in the Netherlands you have lab space. I will remember that. Olivier, lab space is one thing, but I think the second thing is to give young entrepreneurs or scientists who jump directly into founding a company with basically no background in business, the right mentorship and advice. How is the situation in France? Do you think you have enough spaces where scientists can go to get advice? What do you think is the situation?
Well, as Jérôme said, learning from peers and from experts is absolutely key. The drug discovery process and development, as we know, is an extremely sophisticated one. So by no means you can just start on your own dynamics and think you're going to succeed on your own. So in France, there's been for years very strong support from the government that helped create some innovation clusters that we call the Incubateur Allègre, which is a series of incubators that are strongly supported by public subsidies. There's a range of them, mostly located in the Paris area, where there's about 80% of company creation that happens. So this is very strong to help to be entrepreneurs, to move forward with their ideas and to get support and advice to create their companies and to build a team. So this is a strong asset, I think, together with a lot of financial support. BPI France is one of the world's biggest sovereign funds for deep tech innovation. This is good. So there's strong dynamics at the very early stage level. Then when it comes to transitioning to more of an industrial phase, once you've gone through the proof of concept, once you've identified the key elements of your project and you've started building a team and actually when you know where you have to head in terms of going to a preclinical candidate, talking about the biotechnology area, then you do need to access to alternative expertise and advice. You can find peers that went through the same process, and some serial entrepreneurs are still around in early stage incubators. But very often you don't have that at hand, I would say, and you do need to have access to some additional mentoring and not training, but advice. And I would say that this is what is lacking, and that's at least the analysis that many people are doing in the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in France. So very strong support for company creation, but then a little bit of a lack to go to the next stage. It's not that there's nothing, and especially for digital health or to medtech, there are programs to help transitioning. But for biotech innovation, this is much more difficult. And this is typically why we are having this initiative at Survey, because we feel that we can fill the gap. All of the vast majority of our research activities are in France. We do operate worldwide in 150 companies, but our research is mostly located in France. So it means that most of the expertise can be at hand to someone who's really looking for support. And this is what we want to do with this new place that we want to develop, to have a place where people that have been residing in an incubator for a couple of years, they have funds and they need to transition, then they can turn to this new place. They can enter the place without any engagement or any contract with Servier in terms of IP or research. They can just enjoy the services of the place, the mentorship, the networking, plus they can turn to Servier experts and have access to advice without giving up their IP, without giving up the control of their project. And they can even turn to us to run some experiments that they would never be able to run in an incubator or even in their original academic lab. So this is exactly what we want to provide, and down the road, obviously, to be able to find a good match with some of the companies. We would never be able to support all of them. We are heading for about 100 seats in our place, so we do not aim at having all these companies partnering with Servier, but some of them, when there's a good fit, and to all of them, we would provide or attempt to provide some assistance and guide them to reaching the, let's say, typically the clinical development stage.
Thank you very much, Olivier. When I talk to US-based investors and ask them the question, what blocks you to invest directly in Europe, because we have, thanks to the Horizon programs, a lot of technology developed in basic research on the universities, but tremendously lack capital for development in later stages. When you ask these questions, US-based investors, I usually get one answer, and this is, look, I mean, the United States are a single market, and when I look towards Europe, it's fragmented. Irene, you are active in Europe with INIT since 2004, and I have been pointing out at collaboration. How do you perceive the developments in Europe when it comes to cross-border collaborations since 2004?
Thank you for that interesting question. Vienna, to start with, Vienna has invested into life sciences for the very same reason as everybody else since really, really a long time. INIT got started after Austria and Vienna have started to invest into that domain. Yet what I do see is that the life sciences, the term life sciences, now really starts to change much more from what I may call, if you permit, the classical life sciences, meaning pharmaceutical, biotechnology, therapy development, into what I saw increasingly popping up 10 years ago, is medtech companies, which were not that strong when I started in 2004. And now in 2011, also a lot of digital startups really started to pop up, and the number now is really amazing. So the term life sciences has changed over time from rather therapy development towards medical treatment, really medical devices, etc., towards digital solutions. That's one thing. The other thing, this also has been mentioned already, there is an amazing amount of talent in Europe. And it goes back to the great sciences and scientists in Europe, I think, who started to think of technology transfer, not only in terms of licensing out their solutions and basic research results, but also in terms of incorporating their own startups. And that number has increased over time. The driving force has increased over time. And that also means that those who have started a business already, maybe failed, some of them sold, they come back and give back that know-how and bring it into newly starting companies. And that's really a driving force that speeds up the entire process. And I see a lot of not only number, but also the entire ecosystem, startup ecosystem, becoming more professional. And I think that's really what there is a lot of potential in Europe, which we can still deliver, I would say.
Thank you, Irene. Let's stay a little bit. Yeah. Go ahead.
If it comes to investors, which is, of course, in particular for life sciences companies, is much more difficult than for many other domains. I also see a similar development. The money available for life sciences startups is increasing, whereas there's still a lot of potential. What I also do see, probably due to the low interest rates, etc., that investing into startups has become more available to a bigger public. There's more people looking into investing into startups, be it by crowdfunding, but also business angels. And I also see more and more institutional investors investing into either fund-of-funds instruments or directly. The pharmaceutical industry was really the first one who was establishing corporate venture, corporate funds, VCs. But now we do see it from others too, like insurance companies, just take Unica Ventures, but others, medtech companies. So we do see a lot more also different types of investors being available in Europe also.
Thank you, Irene, for your points. You mentioned the investors, and I would like to stay a little bit on that side and wonder what are actually the differences between finding funding in Europe and finding funding in the United States. Sharon, if I remember right, you know both territories quite well. What is your opinion on that?
Right. So in the United States, in the Bay Area, I spent over 3 years working, first of all, for an angel investment group, and second of all, working with a lot of VCs there. Now, obviously, San Francisco is really one of the top US biotech hubs, and so as a consequence, you see many startups. I saw about 400 decks being presented each year to the angel group. As a consequence of that, and there being readily available capital, you see that every idea, if it comes from a major top university, would get some level of funding, and also with the tech infrastructure there, you would have both the traditional life science investors, as well as tech investors coming into the mix. And as a result, oftentimes, when I judge and look at companies, I would look at their team, I would look at their intellectual property, and I would look at, most importantly, does it work, or is there a scientific basis, a rationale for the idea or for the drug? But you would still see in the Bay Area that companies would be, I would say, typically overvalued for what they would show on those points. Now, in contrast to what I now see in Europe, is that when companies approach us to join Pivot Park, typically, the work that has gone into their proof of concept or their initial idea is much more elaborate, and so these companies are actually, I would say, more de-risked, and so there's a tremendous opportunity, I think, in Europe for both investors that are in Europe, but also for US or Asian investors that are looking at, again, life sciences, drug discovery in Europe. I think the companies are evaluating themselves right, instead not overvaluing the companies. And I have to echo Irene in that the investor climate in Europe is also becoming much more sophisticated, so that you will see people in Europe also finding the right opportunities and funding them. So I'm not too worried when I look at the future of, when starting an incubator program, can we make connections with the investors? I think actually that there'll be a big opportunity to get the momentum, to get the institutional investors from whether it be pharma or other companies in Europe involved. I think that the US-based investors can look more to Europe because there are more opportunities there, I think, for them. And then I think that the traditional life science investors in Europe are becoming much more sophisticated.
Thank you, Sharon. Funding, I think, is one important cornerstone when it comes to developing successfully health sciences. Olivier, what is your opinion? What are other key success factors for innovative life science projects?
Well, actually, I very much concur to what Irene and Jeroen said about funding, and more specifically the importance to find the right partner, the right moment, at the right price. So what I see similarly to Jeroen is an increasing gap in the US between, at least from our perspective as a mid-sized European pharma company, an increasing gap between the level of expectations set by the companies and their early VCs in terms of financial input from a potential partner, and what we would value as a drug discovery project with its perspective in terms of, and risks, actually, perspective and risks in terms of development and market access. So that gap is obviously very difficult to handle. Either you pay a very high tag price to access to a still very risky project, or you just watch the catalog and you just don't access to anything because you don't want to enter into this game, or you simply cannot because of the investments that are required. We're talking of a few tens of millions as early as you reach the lead-up stage. So this makes the reasons for success very specific, or at least it requires to companies such as Servier to really think deeply in how you would partner and how you would spot the appropriate projects to support. So what is important there in these dynamics is to find the right slot, as I was saying, and to find the appropriate moment with a project with shows promises, which is strong enough on the scientific rationale and on the team, but which has not yet reached the funding tornado, especially if it's in the US, and to enter into a much more rational and industry-based relationship in order to work jointly. And I think that maybe this is the key thing, to enter into a relationship between the large companies and the young innovation companies, into a relationship which is much less of a client and a provider with an object to sell, which is a project, but much more into a bi-directional relationship, where there's a deep understanding of the stakes of the project, where there's a deep commitment and involvement of both parties, and putting that in the perspective of success, a therapeutic success for patients. Not saying that there's not money and big money involved, but to do this with the most appropriate way. And I think Jeroen mentioned that the market in Europe is sophisticated and becoming increasingly sophisticated. I would take sophistication as this balance between having a market-only approach to drug discovery into a more of a partnership approach with joint vision, joint interest. Of course, money is down the road, and this is very important. But the fundamentals should be really what is driving the teams to a therapeutic success. And I truly think that joining efforts between large and small companies can be a tremendous lever in this respect.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I can absolutely relate to that. I started out in the life science industry in 2006 as an executive at the Novartis spin-out. We got 40 million euros Series A funding right away, so we need a lot of money in the drug development space. From 2015 onwards, I got more and more interested in artificial intelligence and digital health solutions. This is how I got in touch with Irene and INITS and Health Hub Vienna on a more regular basis. And I always wonder, Irene, what are the biggest hurdles today for digital health startups?
That's a very good question. Digital health startups, they have one advantage: they are digital, which sometimes looks so much easier to develop. Yet, the biggest challenge of the digital health startups is really the very, very complicated healthcare system. It is complicated everywhere, but in Europe, we have the issue that it's really dependent on the national systems, and they are very diverse. So if you develop an e-health solution for the Austrian healthcare system, which fits into that system business model-wise, it by far does not mean that it fits into the German or the Swiss, only to talk about the German-speaking countries, not even thinking about a lot further. So this is definitely a challenge on top of proving that it really works. Yeah? What I also see is that a lot of digital health solutions aim at preventive medicine. And of course, this is always a challenge. How do I prove that prevention really works if it comes to whatever long-term diseases like diabetes or whatever? And that's another challenge, yeah? Because basically they kind of have to prove to a healthcare system that they do work, yet also if it comes to therapy, classical drug development, talking about preventive medicine is always difficult. The third level is really the regulatory level, and that's because yes, these, technology-wise, an app or whatever is not really new, yet in the healthcare system, it is very new. So the regulatory bodies are lagging behind the potential of those solutions also. This makes every e-health entrepreneur a real pioneer because they aim at markets which are under-regulated is maybe, is a difficult, in its positive way, but it also has negative side effects because it can, over time there will be rules and regulations being developed, and it means that every pioneer, every e-health entrepreneur really pushes the limits concerning these levels. And that's, for instance, led to the situation that, telemedicine is not that well spread in Europe because the regulatory bodies, there is no clear rule yet how to do, how is it being remunerated by the insurances, etc. So it's pushing the borders on the business model level, and that's really, really difficult. If it comes to funding, I do see it's probably easier to get funding for e-health solutions, but it's really the market entry that is the more difficult thing. And it's not marketing. What I mean is entering the market. How do I get into the system so it can really, the solution can really scale? I think that's the most important differences to the classical life sciences business, because this basically stayed the same. It's still the same. Still, as a startup, you develop a therapy to a certain stage, and then you rather aim to, licensing it out or selling it to a pharmaceutical company. That business model didn't change over 20 years, but for the health, digital health solution, it definitely, they do change systems. They do change healthcare systems. So it's all very dynamic on that level.
Thank you, Irene. We have 5 minutes left on the call, and I would like to wrap up the session with one last round of questions that I usually like to ask at the end of my podcast interviews. Sharon, we are all looking to the United States for investors, and if a US-based investor wants to come to Europe, what single piece of advice would you give this investor?
Wow. I think that the advice I would give them is that they should leave their US hat back in the US and really approach this from a value perspective. There's so much value in European startups, in the larger companies that are in Europe that are partnering with these startups, that they really should approach investing in European startups from a value perspective and not just from a valuation perspective.
Thanks. Olivier, what's your advice?
Well, I think this is a little bit of what we said before, and focusing on value is typically one strong advice. Reaching out to expert mentoring, I think among the co-working places, incubators, accelerators, there's a lot of expertise, and I think Irene has been very clear about what she can do to support medtech and e-health. So yes, look at the environment. It's extremely dynamic, extremely rich. There's a lot of value. There's a lot of gemstones, and there's a huge number of opportunities which are shaping up into more and more visible and organized initiatives. So come here and talk.
Thanks. And Irene, what's your advice?
There is one sentence that fits here very well too. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So my advice is don't underestimate the cultural differences. In many ways, getting into Europe and investing here, you have to think differently. We heard that already, but also you cannot just transfer the entire team of a startup into, for instance, the United States. So I think the cultural differences just have to be borne in mind, because what every investor wants to have is a startup that scales beyond those borders. But the culture definitely is the barrier to that.
So we are at the end of this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Sharon, Olivier, and Irene, for your time and your input and wisdom, and for sharing. And I wish you all the best and stay safe.
Thank you for inviting us. Thanks for the great discussion. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Life Science Nation.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you all. Very nice discussion.
Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.